Writer F. Scott Fitzgerald said, "Character is plot, plot is character." And in storytelling video games, the main character is the most crucial part in making a memorable game. This is how the player interacts with the world and drives the plot forward. If a player cannot immerse themselves with the character, the whole point of finishing the story just falls flat. But when a character has such clear motivations and their actions have such an impact on the world and the story, you as the player can really feel how alive the video game is. For those who've been living under a rock the past few months, Silksong finally released. A game that has been in development for 7 years and has been on my Steam wishlist for 5 finally came out. And was it worth it? Absolutely. The world design to the bosses, to the story, to the movement, everything was encapsulated into this beautiful game that deserves all the praise it gets. And I could talk about these phenomenal features of game design for hours, but what I found really fascinating upon my first playthrough was character. More importantly, the main character, Hornet, and the way she's written. Team Cherry's masterful writing seamlessly fits Hornet into the world of Farloom, while still making her disruptive enough to push the narrative forward and allow players to experience this game in its entirety. And I just gotta say, this game's peak. It's brilliant. There's nothing better than this. This is 2025 Game of the Year. Game of the Year, I'm telling it now. I've always been captivated by the story behind the game I am playing, but especially whilst writing the script for this video, I am aware that video game stories, or the lore, has very different meanings depending on the style of game you are playing. Multiplayer games such as Valorant or Overwatch do have a story and a reason for the existence of the world. Although, I don't know why that world had to include Lotus. There are good guys and bad guys fighting for their own causes, and that is demonstrated through online play. But those games are not there for the story. They are made for the fast action gameplay and the competitive edge. Raze's backstory in Valorant is one of overthrowing a tyrannical company to protect her home. When I'm playing Valorant, I don't think about Raze's motivation for fighting. I'm thinking of the giant rocket launcher she's aiming straight at me. In these kinds of games, the story comes second, third, maybe even 10th in their list of priorities. It is not why you play the game. Interesting after the fact, but not essential to the gameplay experience. Single-player games naturally give us more room for the story to come alive. However, we still don't see them all follow the same rules. Silksong is the sequel to Team Cherry's huge success, Hollow Knight. An indie superstar that even included Hornet as multiple boss fights and as an NPC. And despite her only being part of the player's journey for a short duration of the game, we still learn a lot about her just from the short interactions of dialogue woven into the game. We know that she is a bug, half spider and half worm, born of both a powerful beast and a higher being. Why she's called Hornet then, after a wasp? I don't really know. Anyways, Hornet already had a lot to live up to, being from two of the strongest ancestries. And in Hollow Knight, we see this manifest into a responsibility she feels to protect her home, Hallownest. She initially wants to stop us, the Knight, from passing further into the kingdom and says that the Knight must prove itself worthy of the truth, knowing that only a strong being could handle the fate of Hallownest, and says that she will feel no sadness in a weakling's demise. She values a creature's strength, as in the infected city, strength is the most essential in a bug's survival. But it is also the only thing that can save her kingdom. The actual Hollow Knight was raised to be strong and still failed, so she cannot allow there to be hope of change if us, the Knight, are not strong enough to defeat her. Still, she gets smoked twice, and even praises our strength. Hornet's motivations are very clear. She wants to save her kingdom, but remains cold and almost unfeeling as we, the player, show our strength. She speaks eloquently like someone raised as a daughter of a king and queen, but harshly like someone who has seen battle. And that is all we are left with coming into Hollow Knight's Silksong. But if I just spent all this time talking about Hornet's character in the first game, where she is only a side character, and I've explained how important the main character is to a game's story, well, why didn't the Knight have as strong of a character? Well, that's because of how different the stories are. Some single-player games are trying to tell the story after the fact. Elden Ring, a game I have yet to beat once, has such a fantastic story that is so dense and rich with well thought out characters as main bosses. The best, no debate, being Godric. But you, the main character, are just a tarnished. A banished nobody who, through grit, determination, or absolute cheese, rise your way to becoming the Elden Lord. So why does Elden Ring and its story receive so much praise? Well, because most of it already happened. Through dialogue and key messages, we learn about what happened to the gods, to Melania, to Redan. But as a nobody, at least at the start of the game, it is not fitting for us to be someone of notable importance. Else, why weren't we there in the first place? We aren't there to push the story forward, but rather to experience it, and I guess become God at the end of it or something. Sounds pretty familiar. Hollow Knight is almost the same concept. We are one of thousands of the Pale King's offspring, and while our goal is to defeat the Dreamers and seal the infection inside of us, we don't really speak. Like, at all. Instead, we descend deeper into Hallownest, into the story of how this kingdom fell into ruin, digging up old secrets and eventually, through one way or another, defeat our sibling and stop the infection of a mind-controlling moth. And yeah, also maybe become God at the end. Now, this is very different to Silksong. Firstly, because Hornet talks. She's not an intentionally empty character, but a real and complex being. And secondly, and probably one of the most notable, is the world that we are in. And I know I said I wasn't going to get into game design too much, but this is too important. The map of Hallownest starts here and we explore downward, a deep dive into an old story. The map of Farloom and the Citadel starts here and eventually reaches all the way up here. The games are completely different in their narrative. Hornet is rising higher, overcoming challenges and defeating enemies. The story is happening now and we are the ones causing it to unfold. But if the plot is to be driven forward in a satisfying way, Hornet needs to have a substantial character. And Team Cherry does this through both dialogue and action. Silksong is full of unique and interesting dialogue, but it wouldn't be representative of the elegant writing of Team Cherry if I didn't first talk about Hornet's own dialogue and the way she speaks to others. Her first interaction with another character, the chapel maid, she says, "I see that now, madam. My welcome to your land has not been kind. I had reason to be wary." This is her first line of dialogue, and from this alone we discover so much about her that even if you hadn't played the first game, you're aware of what kind of bug Hornet is. She's respectful enough to call someone who clearly isn't a threat, madam. But we also see her instinctual violence, something that has kept her alive this long. Already we know a lot about who we are playing as. We see both her wisdom of traversing dangerous lands and her kindness when she encounters the greatest NPC ever, Sherma, in the Farfields. He's playing some kind of instrument. It kinda just looks like he's banging metal together. Either way, he's singing to another pilgrim, and Hornet warns him that he should be careful of hunters nearby that could be alerted to the sound of his instrument. Now, Hornet, as such a powerful creature in a land that isn't her own kingdom, has the potential to be arrogant and selfish, and could have just let Sherma get captured. However, she understands the innocence of him and warns him to keep safe, showing care for a creature other than herself. This is when she's met with respect, or at least a non-threatening character. But when she's threatened by Lace, we see both her confidence and aggressive attitude shine through. She says, "Your threats are worthless, child," clearly disregarding the respect that she would show to others much nicer than Lace. And we see this confidence a lot against Lace's arrogance, as in the Citadel, she tells her, "Neither you nor your land have proven my match. This sleeping Citadel shall be no different." Hornet has no choice of cowardice. She is set on a mission and she's driven to complete it, and no matter what is in her way, she is confident in her abilities to see it through. But we don't just learn about Hornet through her voice, but the voice of others around her. Brandon Sanderson, a very successful fantasy writer, states, "Seeing this through your own eyes, it will sometimes make a character sound a little arrogant, and it could be off-putting. Seeing it through someone else's eyes can be really handy for helping us just really see how interesting and relatable the character is. We like people that other people like." I feel like that phrase about arrogance really applies to Hornet. Someone who speaks highly of her own abilities could be seen in a negative light as someone who is cocky. However, with other people talking of her skills and of Hornet in general, we gain a new insight into her character while being reinforced of old ideas. For example, her willingness to help others who face the dangerous elements of the Citadel is demonstrated through her interactions with the caretaker. Now, this NPC is a very pessimistic snail who is initially very brash and negative when speaking to Hornet, distrusting of her intentions as she is a much stronger bug, so why would she help those less fortunate and weaker? This is clearly someone who has faced hardships alone and continues to face them when we reach him at the top of the Citadel. He is naturally suspicious of those stronger than him, as the strongest being in Farloom, Grandmother Silk, not only doesn't interact with the pilgrims like Hornet, but is actually the one causing a lot of the struggles he faces. And Hornet's relationship with Silk and the power it brings her also reinforces this suspicion. This all changes towards the end of Act 2, and he develops a level of respect towards Hornet. Through her questlines of donations or mission saving Sherma, the caretaker sees the good that Hornet is doing and says, "Ain't you come a long way, Bellringer, granting wishes, saving bugs." And even further, he breaks free of his hopeless view and believes in change thanks to Hornet, even helping us set a trap before we face the final boss, Grandmother Silk. So what exactly has dialogue taught us about Hornet's character? She's respectful yet confident. She is kind to those in need despite her dominance over them. She is strong and has faced hardships, and she is even aggressive to those who go against her and others who are worse off in Farloom. And I believe all these traits come down to one character concept, one we saw a lot in the original Hollow Knight, and that is responsibility. A character such as Hornet sees those weaker than her and chooses to help them. She fights bosses that are way larger than her and that could easily defeat her, all for the sake of others, no matter how dangerous it is. Huh. That sounds familiar. But it's true though, while Hornet isn't quippy or late on rent payment, especially not after the Silksong sales, this choice to help those weaker because you are stronger is at the core of her character. She did it in Hollow Knight to save a kingdom in which she was one of the strongest, and now the same in Silksong. And while it's hard to relate to a character in a world full of just bugs, this choice to help others is what adds to her relatability and makes her more likable as a character. Despite the negative reaction she receives, she still chooses to help, and it's almost completely shown through dialogue. Team Cherry could have started the game like Star Wars, with scrolling text or a narrative introduction that explains who Hornet is and why she ended up in Farloom. But not only could that text go on forever, it's unnatural. Of course, context can be helpful, and some of the dialogue that references her past rewards players who have played the first game. But having so much information thrown at you at the very beginning could intimidate new players. And as Team Cherry anticipated, there were a lot of new players. Within a game that has so much dialogue, using this as a tool for character exposition allows it to be more natural. The change in the caretaker alone shows the impact Hornet has and therefore the player has in the world. And because we as people thrive on progression, we want to see more. Which brings us to talk about this progression through Hornet's actions as the driving force of the narrative. Now in the original game, the knight's movement and combat are very static, and despite the spells we receive later, its base movement remains the same. And that makes sense for a character that is literally hollow on the inside. There is no personality to show. As for Hornet, her movement from the beginning already reveals her experience in combat and traveling dangerous worlds. The swings of her needle use a lot more of her body than just her arms, as we see even her legs move with every attack. This is similar to boxers, who will twist their hips in order to generate enough force for that knockout punch. It is a learned movement incorporating basically the entire body as one into the attack, rather than Team Cherry just outright saying she is. Her directional downward attacks, while causing a lot of initial pain throughout most of the Silksong player base, show the speed and intent behind her attacks, but also a unique style, rather than swinging straight down. Some spiders even attack with a sudden pounce, so this style of attack really fits into her character. And the edge climb, an ability never even possible in Hollow Knight. While alone, these are just small details. Together, they reinforce these ideas of Hornet's skill and experience. But these are just the basic movement patterns. A new feature added to Silksong to replace charms with the crests and tools. Crests completely change your fighting style by affecting attack speed, needle range, and also giving you new abilities. Whereas the tools can be equipped within different slots in the crest to create a build around this new fighting style. For example, the Architect crest has the most red slots, which allows for the most traps and extra damage tools to be equipped, kind of like Batman having so many gadgets at his disposal. In comparison, the Shaman crest not only swaps out your base nail attack for a ranged one, but also allows you to equip 3 silk skills compared to the rest which only allow 1, a crest that clearly favours maintaining range. Now there are a lot of tools in this game, 51 to be exact, and while some such as Longclaw that just increase the range of your needle are very simple and straightforward, A lot of them are very unique and bring about such a different style of gameplay and can even combine with each other to be even stronger. This is great gameplay wise, it allows the player to fight in the way they want to. But as for her character, this speaks to Hornet's ability to adapt and the range of her skill set. All these crests, traps, and even a money gun are wielded by Hornet with ease. There's no training curve required for these tools, one, because that would get really boring by 51, but also because of how capable Hornet is. Her fighting style can change easily from a slow, heavy hitting to a fast-paced, sharp attack. She can lay traps in wait of the next boss, or blind her enemies, or electrocute them. There are just so many things Hornet becomes quickly capable of that we never question. Not because we're ignorant, but because Team Cherry has made it a point of Hornet that she can do so much more than the Knight could have. Still, she got smoked. This reminds me of one of my favourite games, Jedi Survivor. Also a sequel, we follow Cal Kestis, a Jedi on the run who shares a lot of the same values as Hornet. Helping the weak despite being much stronger and facing those who are unjust even when they are the most powerful being alive. In the first game, Cal could change his lightsaber between a single blade, double bladed, and two separate lightsabers, already showing his skills with a lightsaber. But then in the sequel, we have even more to work with. There are the original 3 forms, each with much more in-depth improvements, but also 2 more that he learns at different points in the game's story, being the lightsaber and blaster combo and the crossguard. Like the crest in the Silksong, Cal adapts to these new forms very quickly, and it makes sense because of the skills with a lightsaber we have already seen. Respawn Entertainment is another company that does know how to make Pika games, unless it's Titanfall 3. Please, I'm just begging for that game. Silk skills were also a new addition in the replacement of spells for Silksong, but I won't talk too much about them as I feel I'd be repeating myself, but there's one I really want to mention that you receive against one of the boss fights, and that is the cross stitch. Phantom, like Hornet, is very quick and agile in her attacks, also using her own needle. But she also has her own parrying ability which deflects one of Hornet's attacks and retaliates with a wickedly quick series of attacks back. This is someone who can clearly go against Hornet in battle. However, in the end, Hornet not only wins but does so using Phantom's same attack against her. Something that she would have only seen a few times in the space of a couple of minutes, and executes it flawlessly on her opponent. To see a move that is so quick and effective and be able to land it perfectly within such a short amount of time is the true show of her skills, and it's why it's one of my favourite boss fights in the entire game. Everything up until now has been centered around finding upgrades around the map. However, this reactive learning, this cinema, really captured the idea of how skilled and strong Hornet is. But why is it important for Hornet to be so strong? Well, firstly, Silksong will kick your ass. This little bug does the same damage as God, and it can be very easy for a player to feel discouraged when they have to do the entire Hunter's March walk back, just for the prize at the end to be the Beast Crest. I used it once, hated it, and never again. It's a hard game, and a lot of people thought it was too hard. Pussies! However, that is what these games are at their core. Someone so much smaller than the enemies they face exploring this larger-than-life world, and in the end, fighting God. And in particular for Silksong, the story is now, and Hornet is the main driving force of this story. So for the player to reach this almost impossible ending in a satisfying way, the challenge needs to be difficult, but not so difficult that the success would just seem like bad writing or luck. Hornet needs to appear capable enough in her skills and strength for us as players to believe in her ability to defeat Grandmother Silk and all the other bosses she fights along the way, but also so outmatched in size or damage that the challenge of the fight is still so exciting. For example, in A New Hope, Luke Skywalker only has a few skills. He's a skilled pilot and has a slight connection to the Force, but when faced with, the Death Star, the task of shooting a torpedo into the one weak spot at the precise moment in order to blow it up seems impossible. Almost impossible. The brilliant writing showing Luke's skills beforehand gives the audience a slight hope, so that when he does rely on both his connection to the Force and his ability to pilot, and he hits the shot that blows up the largest space station in the galaxy, it still seems difficult. It took all of Luke's focus and hard work up to this point. But success doesn't seem impossible, so the victory seems so much more satisfying. Hornet, like Luke, is the main character because her capabilities are what push the plot forward. Not just the main plot, but the side quests with other NPCs, such as Sherma's journey up the Citadel. If we had a much weaker character to work with, the success might feel a bit lucky or undeserved, like we're too much out of our depth. But every time Team Cherry proves to us just what Hornet can do, it is a step closer to those final hits at the end of the game. Hornet's dialogue brings her character to life and makes the player want to see her story through to the end. The actions she performs drive this story to its end in a climactic way for a fantastic ending. Thank you for watching this video. This game was awesome, I loved almost every second of it and I can't wait to play it again. The attention to detail when fleshing out Hornet's character is such a small part of this enormous game where every instance feels like it was created with quality in mind. It's like I'm walking through a work of art every time I play. I guess the years of waiting were worth it. Hollow Knight has been my favourite game for years, and I think it's finally found a contender. Still, overtaking my hours in Among Us might be the hardest challenge yet, but I don't think I'll be making a video on that game anytime soon. Unless... I'm kidding. Thanks again. Bye.